at my daughter's wedding. Her new husband pulled a chair out from under me as I sat down. I crashed to the floor in front of everyone. But as I lay there in pain and humiliation, I realized his cruel prank was a calculated move. It was a final clue I needed to uncover the terrifying truth about the con man she had just married. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments. My name is Robert James Holloway. For 30 years, I ran a successful architectural firm in Portland, Oregon. Holloway Designs was my life's work, but it was always second to my true masterpiece. My daughter, Chloe, her mother, my beloved Eleanor, was killed by a drunk driver when Chloe was only 7 years old. The light in our world was extinguished in an instant on a rain-slick highway. The grief was a physical presence in our house, a heavy, silent fog that clung to everything. I had a choice to make in the aftermath: succumb to the darkness or build a new world for my little girl. I chose to build. I became both mother and father. I learned to braid her hair. Though my first attempts were clumsy and lopsided, I attended tea parties with her stuffed animals, my large frame folded into a tiny chair. I read Little Women to her every night, doing a different voice for each March sister until her tears for her mother were replaced, however briefly, by giggles at my terrible impersonation of Amy. I worked long hours, but they were for her. Every blueprint I drew, every contract I signed, was for her future. I wanted to give her the security and opportunities that Eleanor and I had dreamed of. The firm grew, and so did she. She was my shadow on weekends, accompanying me construction sites, her small hard hat wobbling on her head as she pointed at steel girders and declared them very good bones, Daddy. She was smart, compassionate, and possessed a fierce inner strength that reminded me so much of her mother. She went to college at Stanford, studying art history, and I felt both immense pride and a cavernous loneliness when I dropped her off at her dorm. The house was too quiet, but she called every Sunday, her voice full of the excitement of her new life. After graduation, she moved back to Portland, landing a curator job at a prestigious modern art gallery. We settled into a new, adult rhythm: weekly dinners, trips to the coast. She was my best friend. I thought our bond, forged in loss and fortified by unwavering love, was unbreakable. I was naively, catastrophically wrong. I first met Jason Wells on a crisp autumn evening. Chloe had been talking about him for weeks with a giddy excitement that made my heart clench. "You'll love him, Dad. He's so smart. He gets me." She brought him to the house for dinner. I prepared coco vin, Eleanor's recipe. When I opened the door, he was there. He was undeniably handsome, tall, with sandy blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, and a jawline that looked like it was chiseled from granite. He wore a blazer that was just casual enough to be thoughtful, but expensive enough to signal success. He thrust a bottle of exceptionally good Burgundy into my hand. "A small token, Robert. Chloe says you're a man of refined taste." It was smooth, too smooth. His handshake was firm and lingering, a practiced display of confidence. Over dinner, he held court. He was a commercial real estate broker, he explained, on the verge of closing a monumental deal for a new mixed-use development on the waterfront. He name-dropped investors from Dubai, talked about seven-figure commissions, and spoke of the Portland elite as his personal friends. I asked him about his family. His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Midwest folks. Simple, hard-working people. Not really in the scene out here. It was a deft, rehearsed dodge that invited no follow-up questions. Chloe hung on his every word, her eyes shining. I saw the warning signs, the slight exaggeration of his stories, the way his eyes flickered to gauge my reaction after every boast, the condescending way he explained the basics of real estate to me, as if a man who had built a multi-million-dollar firm wouldn't understand property value. It was a performance of a successful man, not the substance. After they left, I felt a deep, unsettling dread. "So," Chloe asked, her face hopeful, "what did you think?" "He's very charismatic," I said, choosing my words carefully. "He is, isn't he?" she gushed, missing my hesitation entirely. "He's everything, Dad. Everything I've ever wanted." The knot in my stomach tightened. Over the next few months, Jason became a constant presence. He was charming, attentive, and lavished Chloe with gifts. A vintage poster from her favorite artist, a weekend trip to a spa in Napa, tickets to see a band she loved in Seattle. But my unease grew. Small things. He never offered to pay for our dinners out, always letting the check sit until I inevitably picked it up. He would promise Chloe the world. I'm going to buy you a house in the West Hills, baby. But the promises were always vague, future tense. Once, I ran into a business associate, Mark Henderson, who dealt in commercial properties. I casually mentioned Jason Wells. Mark's affable expression faded. Wells? Yeah, I know the name. Smooth talker. Floats around a lot of big meetings, but never seems to close anything. There are whispers. Nothing concrete, Rob. Just be careful. The whispers were enough for me. I couldn't stand by. I hired a private investigator, a gruff, no-nonsense former cop named Frank Durano. A week later, Frank sat in my study, a manila folder on his lap. Your instincts were right, Mr. Holloway, he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. Jason Wells is a fantasy. He laid it out. The BMW 7 Series, leased and 2 payment behind. The penthouse apartment in the Pearl District, a 600-square-foot rental he was subletting from a friend of a friend. And he was behind on that rent, too. The massive real estate deal, a phantom. He had been shopping the same undercooked proposal for 2 years, using doctor financial projections and fake letters of intent to string along small-time investors. Most damning of all was his history with women. Frank had found a pattern. Jason targeted smart, successful, often slightly vulnerable women from good families. He would love bomb them, propose quickly, and then, once the engagement was official, would start borrowing money for investments that fell through, for medical emergencies for a fictional sick aunt, for tax bills that needed immediate payment. He had left a trail of heartbroken, financially drained women in 3 states. He was a predator, a financial and emotional vampire. I felt sick. I thanked Frank and paid him his fee, the folder burning a hole on my desk. I confronted Chloe that night. I showed her the documents, the photos of his real apartment, the statements from the leasing agency. I pleaded with her. Chloe, sweetheart, he's a con man. He's using you. He's after your trust fund, your future, everything your mother and I built for you. Her reaction was worse than I could have ever imagined. She didn't cry. She got cold. Fury unlike any I had ever seen from her contorted her beautiful features. How dare you, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. How dare you spy on him? On me? You just can't stand that I'm happy without you. You've been jealous of him from the start. You think I'm too stupid to know a good man when I see one. Chloe, no. Jason warned me you would do this, she shouted, cutting me off. He said you were controlling, that you'd try to sabotage us because you're financially dependent on me and you're afraid of being alone. I didn't want to believe him, but here you are, proving him right. The words were like knives. Jason had been poisoning her against me for months, preemptively discrediting me. He had turned my love into a weapon to be used against me. Get out, she said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. If you can't be happy for me, then don't bother coming to the wedding. I choose him. The door slammed shut. I stood alone in my quiet, empty house, the ghost of Eleanor's laughter echoing the halls, and I felt the foundation of my life crack open. The invitation arrived a month later. Heavy cardstock, embossed script. Chloe and Holloway and Jason Michael Wells request the pleasure of your company. It felt like a mockery. I was torn apart. My pride screamed at me to stay away. But my love for my daughter, even a daughter who currently hated me, won out. I had to be there. I had to bear witness. I had to be present so that when this house of cards inevitably collapsed, she would know her father was still there, waiting to catch her. I bought a new suit. I RSVP'd yes. I practiced my speech in the mirror, my voice catching on the paragraphs about her mother. The day was a perfect, sunny June afternoon. The ceremony was held at the exclusive Waverly Country Club, a venue that must have cost a fortune Jason didn't have. I later learned he had put the deposit on a credit card he maxed out for the occasion. He was playing the part to the hilt. I walked Chloe down the aisle. She was breathtakingly beautiful in her mother's vintage lace wedding gown, which she had secretly taken from my house. But her arm was stiff in mine, her smile forced. She didn't look at me. She looked only at Jason, who stood at the altar like a golden idol. The reception was a blur of forced smiles and polite conversation. Distant relatives asked me where I was taking my retirement. Old friends gave me sympathetic looks. I felt like an actor in a play about my own life. Jason moved through the crowd, the charming, victorious groom, clapping men on the back and kissing women's hands. Every time he looked at me, his eyes held a glint of cold, victorious malice. Then it was time for the speeches. The best man, one of Jason's slick friends, gave a generic, mildly insulting toast about Jason's prowess with women and money. People laughed awkwardly. Then it was my turn. The band leader announced. And now, the father of the bride, Robert Holloway. There was warm, supportive applause. I stood, my knees weak. I walked to the center of the dance floor, where the microphone stood. A chair had been placed there for me to sit in after my speech, a tradition at these events. Jason, every performer, jumped up. Here, Bob, let me get that for you, he said loudly, his voice oozing false generosity. He grabbed the back of the heavy wooden chair and pulled out with a flourish, positioning it perfectly for me. I nodded, a curt, wordless thanks. I turned to face the crowd, my index cards trembling in my hand. I looked at Chloe. For a split second, our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of the little girl I knew. It gave me strength. I began to lower myself into the chair, my weight shifting, my body trusting the solidity of the object that was supposed to be there. The moment my center of gravity committed, Jason yanked the chair backward with a sharp, violent, and precise pull. There was no resistance, no warning, just a sudden, terrifying sensation of falling. The world upended. My hip and elbow connected with the unyielding marble floor, with a crack that echoed to the suddenly silent room. A white-hot bolt of pain shot at my side. The air was driven from my lungs. The index cards from my speech fluttered around me like falling leaves. A collective, horrified gasp sucked the air out of the ballroom. 300 people fell dead silent. I lay there, stunned, humiliated, pain radiating through my body. I looked up. Jason's face was a masterpiece of feigned shock and concern. "Oh my God! Bob!" he cried, his voice dripping with false alarm. The leg must have been loose. "Are you okay? You really have to be more careful at your age." He reached out a hand, but his eyes, visible only to me, were gleaming with pure, unadulterated triumph. He had done it. He had humiliated me in front of everyone I knew and loved, and he was getting away with it, playing concerned son-in-law. The worst part? Chloe. She rushed forward, but not to me. She went to him, putting a hand on his arm. "Jason, it's okay. It's not your fault," she murmured, comforting him. She glanced down at me, a mess on the floor, and her look was not one of concern, but one of embarrassment. Embarrassment for me. That was the second crack, the one that broke my heart completely. I took Jason's offered hand. His grip was like iron, a final, silent squeeze of dominance. I pulled myself up, wincing at the pain in my hip. I forced a smile, a Herculean effort. I picked up the microphone from where it had fallen. "How clumsy of me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Please enjoy the party." I abandoned my speech, the words about her mother forever unspoken, and limped back to my table, every step agony, every pitying stare a fresh burn. The rest of the reception was a special kind of torture. People would come over, pat my shoulder, ask if I was okay. Just a bruised ego. I joke. The words ashed in my mouth. I left as soon as it was socially possible, driving home through a blur of tears and rage. I spent the next 2 days in a fog of pain, both physical and emotional. My hip was a spectacular mess of purple and blue bruises, but the deeper wound was in my soul. The image of Chloe comforting Jason, while I lay on the ground, played on a loop in my mind. On the third day, the fog cleared, burned away by a cold, focused fury. Lying in that hospital bed in my own living room, I had a crystal clear epiphany. This wasn't over. His little stunt wasn't the end of his victory. It was the beginning of his end. He had made a fatal error. He had underestimated a father's love and overestimated his own cleverness. I was no longer Robert Holloway, the grieving widower, the gentle architect. I was a man with a singular purpose: to protect my daughter and dismantle the monster she had married, brick by fraudulent brick. My first call was to Frank Durano, the PI. Frank, it's Robert Holloway. I need you back on the clock. Dig deeper. I want everything. His childhood, his family, every bank account, every lie, every person he's ever screwed over. I don't care what it costs. Frank grunted. Had a feeling I'd be hearing from you. I already have a few more threads to pull. I'll get to work. Next, I needed a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. A shark. I called an old college friend, now a powerful attorney in New York. I gave him the broad strokes. He didn't hesitate. I know just a guy in Portland. His name is Marcus Thorne. He's expensive, ruthless, and he specializes in taking down narcissists. I'll have him call you. Marcus Thorne called within the hour. His voice was calm, measured, and intelligent. I told him the story, holding nothing back. He listened without interruption. Mr. Holloway, he said when I finished, what you're describing is a classic sociopathic pattern. The love bombing, the isolation, the financial exploitation, the public humiliation to establish dominance. Your goal cannot be to simply get a divorce. Your goal must be an annulment on the grounds of fraud, and to see him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. We need to box him in so completely, he has nowhere to run. I want to destroy him, I said, my voice quiet and steady. I understand, Thorne replied. We will, but we will do it legally, methodically, and permanently. Send me everything you have from your investigator. Do not engage with him. Do not speak to Chloe. Let him think he's won. The most dangerous enemy is one who believes you are already defeated. I followed his instructions. I became a ghost. I deleted Jason's number from my phone. I didn't call Chloe. I focused on my mission. Frank Durano was an artist. Over the next few weeks, his reports arrived in encrypted emails, each one more damning than the last. He discovered Jason's real name was Jason Welsh, not Wells. He'd changed it years ago, distancing himself from a past that included a father serving time for fraud in a Nebraska state prison. The apple didn't fall far from the tree. He found the offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It was empty, but had seen a flurry of small transactions from various women over the years, all funneled through a shell corporation before being withdrawn as cash. Most importantly, Frank found the current scheme. Jason was in the final stages of conning a reclusive, elderly, and incredibly wealthy widow named Mrs. Evelyn Gable, posing as a top broker for a fictional heritage properties group. He had convinced her to invest her entire life savings, $1.2 million, into a non-existent senior living community. The contracts were masterful forgeries. The closing date for the wire transfer was set for 2 weeks after he returned from his honeymoon. This was it. This was the big score he'd been living on credit to achieve. I relayed all of this to Marcus Thorne. This is perfect, Thorne said, but we need more than documents. We need a confession. We need him to admit it on record, in a context that leaves no doubt. We devised a plan. It was risky. It was audacious. It was perfect. Thorne, using his connections, set up a meeting with Mrs. Gable and her actual, legitimate financial advisor. We presented her with our evidence. The poor woman was horrified, on the verge of a breakdown. We assured her she wouldn't lose a penny, and that we needed her help to put this man away. She agreed, eagerly. The next part was my idea. Jason's vanity was his greatest weakness. He craved validation from people he perceived as powerful elites. We would speak his language. I had a young, tech-savvy nephew create a flawless digital facade for a Von Habsburg European Capital Fund. We bought a domain, created professional email addresses, and built a bare-bones but elegant website. The narrative was that they were a family office looking to discreetly park significant capital in undervalued U.S. real estate. The day after Jason and Chloe returned from their honeymoon in Bali, paid for by a new credit card he'd opened in her name, a fact Frank discovered. The Von Habsburg Fund sent Jason an email. Dear Mr. Wells, We have been made aware of your waterfront development project through our associates in Dubai. We are intrigued by the potential and would be interested in exploring a substantial equity injection. Our principals believe in moving with discretion and speed. Please advise if this is of interest. Sincerely, Klaus Richter, Managing Director, Von Habsburg Capital. Jason took the bait within minutes. His reply was a masterpiece of arrogant self-importance, agreeing to a conference call. The call was set. My nephew, a drama major with a knack for accents, played the role of Klaus Richter. I sat silently on the mute line, listening. Jason was in his element, spinning his web of lies, inflating numbers, inventing partners. He was so convincing, so smooth, that for a moment I felt a chill of doubt. What if I was wrong? Then Klaus asked the killer question, scripted by Thorne. Your prospectus is impressive, Mr. Wells. But for a transaction of this size, we require absolute certainty. We must be assured there are no other parties with claims to the intellectual property or the land rights. Can you personally guarantee that this project is entirely your own original concept and that you hold exclusive control? Jason didn't hesitate. He was too deep in the fiction. You have my personal guarantee. Herr Richter, this is my vision from the ground up. I have sole control. Any other claims you might hear are from competitors or disgruntled former associates trying to steal my work. They're all lies. It was a perfect recorded admission that the project was a fiction and that he would discredit anyone who said otherwise. We had him. We moved quickly. Marcus Thorne coordinated with the DA's office. A warrant was drawn up for Jason's arrest for attempted wire fraud, based on the evidence from Mrs. Gable and the recorded call. But I wanted more. I wanted a confrontation. I wanted to look him in the eye. When the walls caved in, I invited them to dinner. My house. A reconciliation meal. Chloe was surprised but hopeful on the phone. Oh, Dad, I'm so glad. Jason will be too. He's been so worried about you. I'm sure he had been. They arrived. Jason was smug, patronizing. He shook my hand with a victorious firmness. Good to see you up and about, Bob. You gave us quite a scare. He put his arm around Chloe, a gesture of ownership. Dinner was surreal. I served the same Coke Ovin I'd made the first night I met him. We made stilted small talk about their honeymoon. I could see the tension in Chloe's shoulders, her desperate hope that the charade of a happy family could somehow be real. After dessert, I led them into my study, the same study where Frank had first shown me the truth. Jason, I began, my voice neutral. I've been doing some thinking about that fall I took. He waved a dismissive hand. Water under the bridge, Bob. That wobbly chair. The club should be sued. I had the chair inspected. I said calmly, by a forensic engineer. The legs were perfectly sound. There was nothing wrong with it. His smile didn't falter, but it became fixed. Well, then I guess you're just getting clumsy in your old age. Chloe looked between us, confused. Dad, what is this? I also had some other things inspected, Jason. I continued, my voice hardening. Your financials, your business deals, your history. I picked up a remote and clicked on the large screen TV mounted on my wall. The first document Frank had given me appeared. The lease agreement for his BMW, with the missed payments highlighted in red. Jason's face went pale. What is this? You've been spying on me? Chloe, are you seeing this? This is the paranoia I told you about. Then there's this. I said, clicking to the next image, the photos of his tiny, real apartment. Then the police reports from a woman in Seattle he'd conned out of $50,000. Then the affidavit from Mrs. Evelyn Gable. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with dawning horror as she read the words on the screen. This is all lies. Forgeries. Jason shouted, jumping to his feet, his composure finally cracking. She's a crazy old woman. This is a setup. And what about the Von Habsburg Fund, Jason? I asked quietly. Was Klaus Richter set up too? The blood drained from his face. He understood. He knew it was over. At that moment, the doorbell rang. I answered it. 2 detectives stood there, along with Marcus Thorne. Jason Welsh, one detective said. We have a warrant for your arrest. You have the right to remain silent. The look on his face was everything I had hoped for. The smugness evaporated, replaced by pure, unvarnished terror. He started to sputter, to deny, but the detectives were already cuffing his hands behind his back. Chloe was sobbing, hysterical. Dad, what did you do? What is happening? I turned to her, my heart breaking for her even in my moment of victory. I'm saving you, Chloe. I should have done it sooner. As they led Jason away, he looked back at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so profound it was almost tangible. I met his gaze with a cold, implacable stare. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The door closed. The silence in the study was deafening. Chloe collapsed into a chair, weeping uncontrollably. I let her cry. The truth was a painful surgery, and the anesthetic had just worn off. The legal proceedings were swift and brutal, with the mountain of evidence. The recorded call, Mrs. Gable's testimony, the documents from Frank, and the testimony of 3 other women who came forward after seeing the news. Jason had no leg to stand on. He was charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, attempted grand larceny, and identity theft. He pleaded guilty in a deal that spared him a decades-long sentence, but guaranteed him 7 to 10 years in a federal prison. His real estate license was permanently revoked. He was a convicted felon. Marcus Thorne then filed for an annulment on Chloe's behalf. The judge granted it without hesitation, ruling that the marriage was based on fundamental fraud. Legally, it was as if the wedding had never happened. The healing was slower. Chloe was devastated, humiliated, and traumatized. She moved back home. For the first week, she barely spoke. She just slept and cried. I gave her space. I made her food she didn't eat. I was just there. Finally, one evening, she came into my study. Her eyes were red-rimmed but clear. I'm so sorry, Dad, she whispered, her voice raw. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry for what I said, for what he did to you. I opened my arms and she fell into them, sobbing the deep, healing sobs of someone finally letting go of a terrible poison. It's not your fault, I said, stroking her hair. You saw the best in someone. That's not a weakness. That's your strength. He preyed on that strength. The fault is entirely his. It took over a year of therapy for her to truly believe that. We rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully. We talked about her mother. We talked about everything. The experience changed her, hardened her in some ways, but also made her wiser, more resilient. One afternoon, we were cleaning out the guest room where she'd been staying. She found a box of her old things. In it was a speech I never got to give at her wedding. She unfolded the index cards, her hands trembling. She read it. It was full of love for her, memories of her mother, and hopes for her future. When she finished, she looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Will you give it now? She asked. So I did. I stood in my living room, with just my daughter as my audience, and I gave the father of the bride speech I had written for her. When I finished, we held each other and cried for the wedding that should have been, and for the victory that came from its ashes. Jason's little prank, his moment of petty, cruel triumph, cost him everything. He lost his freedom, his reputation, his livelihood, and his victim. As for me, I got my daughter back. The fall didn't break me. It forged me. I stumbled, yes, but I got back up. And I made sure the man who pushed me would never be able to do it again to anyone. That was my revenge. And it was sweeter than any victory speech I could have ever given. If you like my story, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with as many people as possible. Thanks for watching.